So we're looking at the end of the 5th chapter. Okay? Now, let's get back to work. No, not just in the recording and in the teaching. I also continued the work on this wall. We have taken care of the problem. The nobles and the leaders, the rich have repaid back the poor. We've had this little jubilee thing coming in and set accounts straight. Now the less fortunate, have their sons and their daughters and their vineyards and their properties and their houses back in their own hands. They can take care of themselves. Maybe there was a lesson for them to learn right along with it at the same time. But God does all kinds of things as all these things are happening. Everybody has to take a certain amount of responsibility and hopefully learn from it so it doesn't happen again. And that's kind of what's going on here, and it's working. But imagine if you were to get a letter from the bank, and then another one from the credit card company, and then another one from wherever you have accounts, and all these letters started coming in, and it was stamped paid in full. And you kept on looking at these things, and another would come in the mail. And then the next day another one would come, and you say, what the heck is going on here? What kind of freedom would you feel? Well, you understand that you were in bondage. You understand that the borrower is the slave of the lender. And now, so don't go back out and get into well, now I can go out and let's go on a trip. Let's put it on the credit card. It's paid anyway. Take that credit card away from that guy. Anyway, Nehemiah, his generosity. He's not taking the provisions. He's sharing it with the people. Indeed, verse 16, I also continued the work on this wall, and we did not buy any land. All my servants were gathered there for the work. He says, I didn't know land. I wasn't taking land away from anybody. Remember, the land belongs to God. The land was just, it was on loan. It is God's. Israel was God's land. That's the way it's placed. Even at the beginning of the covenant, he says, this is my land. Indeed, I also continued the work on this wall. We did not buy any land. All my servants were gathered there for the work. He says, I didn't buy any land. I could have. I did not take advantage of the poverty to buy poor man's plots of ground. That's what Barnes said that he was talking about there. I was looking at Albert Barnes' notes on the Bible. I took my share in the work of the wall as a general superintendent. I did not take advantage of the general poverty to buy poor men's plots of fields. He says, I was in what they were doing. Very well could have done it. I'm getting the idea more and more that Nehemiah was pretty well to do. Had some money working with them. And at my table were 150 Jews and rulers, besides those who came to us from the nations around us. It says, I did not take the provision, the governor's provision, but at my table were 150 Jews and rulers. We were feeding these guys all the time. And not only that, those who came to us from the nations around us. Artaxerxes had all the way from Egypt to past Babylon, way further north of Babylon. The Persian, in this time, the Persian Empire was one of the biggest empires that this world had. Well, it was the biggest empire that the world had ever seen, and one of the biggest empires that the world would ever see. He ruled all the way down to Egypt. So there was people that were passing through, Jerusalem was stopping place on the way to Egypt and their cities and wherever else he had. So, hey, Artaxerxes, sending us to Egypt. Oh, come and sit down, we've got to feed these guys. besides those who came to us from the nations around us. So he's feeding people all the time. Now, that which was prepared daily was 1 ox, 6 choice sheep, also fowl were prepared for me, and once every 10 days an abundance of all kinds of wine. Yet in spite of this I did not demand the governor's provisions, because the bondage was heavy on this people. What is Nehemiah doing? Nehemiah is looking at the people. Nehemiah is looking at those who we have deemed unimportant. Well, they're just no. He says, how can I come in and eat of all this fancy food when there's people out there that are starving? We'll have enough. We're gonna take care. God will take care of our needs because we're seeking first the kingdom and His righteousness. But he says, in spite of all this, okay, in spite of what? 1 ox, 6 sheep, fowl were prepared for him every day, an abundance of all kinds of wine. Yet in spite of this, I did not demand the governor's provisions, because the bondage was heavy on this people. He got there. He realized what it was going to be like, or at least had somewhat of an idea what it was going to be like when he got there. It was going to be, when his brother came, said the walls are broken down. Go way up to the first chapter. And he had an idea, okay? The survivors who were left from the captivity in the province are there in great distress and reproach. And boy, they were in, and he gets there and finds out, yep, it's exactly the way, and probably even worse than what I imagined it to be. And as governor, he had a lot, that he could, he says, I'm not going to take it. I did not demand the governor's provisions, because the bondage was heavy on this people. Remember me, my God, for good, according to all that I have done for this people. Little prayer that he shoots up to heaven right about then and says, hey, God. Now, changing the page to the next chapter. And don't let these chapters kind of fool you. Sometimes we get into a chapter division and we think, oh, it's the end of that story, the beginning of another. No. They're just markers along the way to help you find your verses. And don't let them think. Now it happened when Sanballat, Tobiah, Geshem, the Arab, and the rest of our enemies heard that I had rebuilt the wall, and that there were no breaks left in it, though at that time I had not hung the doors in the gates. So we're seeing the progress. Chapter 3, we talked about the Levites and the priests, and talking about the Nethinim and all the people who had helped along the way. And this guy took care of this part of the wall, and he fixed the gate. And then from there, somebody else took. We saw all this. We thought it's not quite done, about halfway. So they continue, and there's been problems along the way, and Nehemiah's had to take care of them. And then they go back to work. Now we get into the 6th chapter. Okay, the wall had been rebuilt. There were no breaks left in it, though at that time I had not hung the doors of the gates. So that was the last thing that they had to do to really finish the job. Now, Sanballat, Tobiah, and Geshem, and the rest of our enemies heard about the progress and where they were. That Sanballat and Geshem sent to me, saying, come, let us meet together among the villages in the plain of Ono, but they thought to do me harm. Here's where discernment comes into Nehemiah's life. Oh, your enemies now, they want to be your friends. Oh, tell them that we made a mistake. Tell them that, we've had a change of mind and a change of heart. We are repenting. We want to say, hey, we really like you, Nehemiah, and we want to, let's have a meeting. Let's get together. He says, yeah, right. I know what these guys want. These guys want